Canadians Gone Wild and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials, and the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer. Welcome back, everyone. We are super happy to be back from Christmas time and are ready for a great 2022. This podcast is called Canadians Gone Wild, and the U.S. economy is slowing. No surprise there. And a really, really stupid, dumbest bill in America. And it comes right out of Washington, D.C., but it only applies to Washington, D.C. So first up, Canadians Gone Wild. So as you guys know, out there in podcast land, the citizenry is really getting tired of this whole pandemic because they're being forced, in some cases, depending on the country, depending on the state, depending on the city, having to wear a mask everywhere you go, or being forced to get a vaccination in order to work, or a booster in order to work, or who knows how many boosters now. People are getting tired of this. They're looking for places to go to be free. And I know that you probably are thinking the same thing. Are you looking for a place to go to be free, where you don't have the power of the state constantly telling you what you need to do because of COVID? Well, as you know, in Canada, they've got some pretty strict rules on COVID because they've got Justin Trudeau as the prime minister. That's right, Mr. Pretty Boy, Justin Trudeau. There were folks that went on a chartered plane and they decided to go crazy on this plane. And it was a chartered plane from Canada. So Canadians partied on a charter flight to Cancun. Now no one will fly them home. That is actually a true story. So adding insult to injury, the passengers, including social media influencers and reality TV stars who were on this plane that was chartered from Canada, were branded idiots Wednesday by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So passengers who filmed themselves partying without masks aboard a chartered flight from Montreal to Mexico face being stranded after 3 airlines refused to fly them home. Sunwing Airlines canceled the return charter flight from Cancun that had been scheduled for Wednesday, and Air Transat and Air Canada also both said they will refuse to fly the passengers home. Adding insult to injury, they were branded idiots Wednesday by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Videos of the December 30th flight shared on social media show unmasked passengers in close proximity while singing and dancing in the aisle and on seats. In one video, a large bottle of vodka appears to be passed among passengers, and a woman appears to be smoking an electronic cigarette. She's not appeared to be, she's vaping. Okay, she's like vaping on and letting out this, you know how you see a vapor, and unlike a regular cigarette where a good amount of smoke comes out of the person's mouth, a vape, it's just massive amounts of like smoke that you see coming out. And that's exactly what you see on this video. And no one is in their seats. Everybody is standing and jumping around and dancing and drinking and vaping and carrying on. All the things that you're told that you can't do or you'll be on the no-fly list. That's what happened on this flight. And we're going to talk about this a bit more in a minute. But first, we have this hysterical clip to play for you, which shows these idiots, by the way, since they're social media influencers, I got to tell you, they're social media influencers, and like dummies, they videotaped each other with their phones and then posted it online. I mean, how stupid is that? While they're on the plane, standing up and carrying on and just this big party. It almost looked like they're on their way to Epstein Island, but instead they're on their way to Cancun. And naturally, the press picked this up. The owner of the plane and the charter company picked this up, and they couldn't get home. We have this hysterical clip. It's a must see and a must listen to at the same time. Here it is.
Partiers drinking, dancing, and vaping captured in videos from a pre-New Year's charter flight to Mexico. The images posted on social media have prompted attention and outrage after a report in the Journal de Montréal, and today, blowback from the Prime Minister.
And it's a slap in the face to see people putting themselves, putting their fellow citizens, putting airline workers at risk by being completely irresponsible.
Transport Canada is now investigating. It was a Sunwing flight that took the partiers, including Quebec influencers and reality TV cast members, to Cancun, but the airline has since canceled their flight home, saying the passengers' behavior was unruly and contravened several Canadian aviation regulations as well as public health regulations. The airline said it provided conditions for the return flight, but that the group didn't accept all of the terms. The travelers could now have a hard time getting back home because other airlines are also refusing to fly them.
So, Air Transat tweeted out, "We are aware of the situation regarding disruptive passengers who have traveled to Cancun and are now attempting to return to Canada on our flights. We confirm that they will be denied boarding based on our legal and regulatory obligations to ensure the safety of both our passengers and crew, which is our top priority." Now, look, podcast listeners, why do you think this is happening? You see, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, oh no, this is just a group of people who are in their 20s and 30s and 40s. They're social media influencers, and this is just the way they act all the time. No, they actually don't. These are people from Canada, and they might as well be from a certain city in the United States like Chicago or New York, where they're just tired of these lockdowns. They're tired of these mandates, the mask mandates. They're tired of the rules. They're tired of the lack of freedom. So they hop on a plane and they're like, okay, we're free from this point forward because we're on our way of all places to Mexico, where there pretty much are no rules in Cancun, other than the rules established by the cartels. But that's a different story. And that is why people are doing this. Is it right to act out of control on a plane? Of course not. Of course not. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is Justin Trudeau of Canada should at least acknowledge that one of the reasons people are trying to get up and out of his country and go to other places that are free is because they're tired of all this nonsense. Open up the economies. Stop forcing people and using the power of the state to curtail their freedom and let them be free, or you're going to get a lot more of this. So Air Canada issued a statement Wednesday that to the extent that we can identify the passengers who were part of the group, like they can't identify them because they all bought tickets, Air Canada is denying boarding to ensure the safety of other passengers and its crew. Among those looking for a way home was Rebecca St Pierre, a 19-year-old student from Trois-Rivières, Quebec, who said she felt abandoned, not knowing how she'll pay for her hotel room, as she has to stay extended in Cancun indefinitely. She said she tested positive for COVID-19 on Wednesday and was in isolation in Tulum, which is south of Cancun, which is actually a beautiful area. She estimated that about 30 others on the flight have tested positive as well. Well, they were all stuck in a plane. They were all drinking and partying and grinding each other on this plane during the entire flight from Canada to Cancun, which I presume was at least 3.5 hours long, if not longer. And so what did they expect, right? The organizer just left everybody. I don't know who's still here. All the flights have been canceled, an emotional St Pierre told the Canadian press. St Pierre said she won the free trip in a contest on Instagram and had never previously heard of the organizer, who identified himself on social media as James William Awad. I was expecting a relaxing week where I was going to be careful, she said, but this turns out to be an expensive trip for something that was supposed to be free. Yeah, well, nothing's free, Miss St. Pierre. And James William Awad, who allegedly was one of the organizers, said, I take this matter very seriously. He tweeted this out. I take this matter very seriously. A simple party on a plane did all this buzz. Wait a minute. He literally said this. A simple party on a plane did all this buzz. It was not just a party. You're not allowed to have a party on a plane. Don't you understand? You're supposed to be seated the entire time unless you have to get up and go to the restroom, correct? But none of them were seated and they're dancing. So I will take a moment to sit down and rethink everything, especially how I can do things better next time. Give me a moment to understand the situation better. I mean, these Canadians are idiots. I'm sorry. Because they elected and then they re-elected not that long ago. I think it was last year, Justin Trudeau, the same dude who heads Canada, who has just made that place miserable to live in because of COVID. And then you have individuals flying to get out of the place because they just want to go somewhere and feel free. They should have done this on the plane. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying, oh yeah, this justifies them dancing and singing and vaping and smoking on the plane and having a massive party. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that what do you expect people to do when they feel like they're caged, right? They feel like they're caged animals and they can't have any kind of freedom whatsoever. And so it doesn't just stop there. Even Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, gets pass from the mainstream media after going maskless at a packed Florida bar. So remember, AOC represents New York City, at least a part of New York City, where there is a mask mandate in order to go inside of any kind of restaurant. And most people in New York City wear masks outside as well, which is stupid. And then in addition to that, they have a vaccine mandate. That is to say, you have to show your vaccine passport in order to get into restaurants and venues and theaters in New York City. Now, I'm not sure to what extent this is enforced, but this is indeed the law in New York City. And so then AOC goes to Florida, of course. And what does she do? When she goes to Florida, she's in this packed bar that's a covered bar outside, okay? The sides of the bar are open, typical Miami. And but the top of the bar is covered. And of course, in New York City, you would, if you're standing up and walking around or dancing or what have you, you would have to be wearing a mask. Well, AOC is not wearing a mask. And she's at this drag bar and they recognize her and they're like, oh my God, we've got a genuine, celebrity here. And she gets up and, it's no mask and just waving to everybody. Most people are going, yay. And then of course you got some people in the background. They're going, boo. Anyway, here's the article. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, was recorded without a mask in a densely packed bar in Miami, according to footage that emerged Sunday. But the mainstream media has largely given her a pass for the hypocrisy. A large crowd at the drag bar, most of whom were also without a mask, applauded the Congresswoman as she waved to them, as first reported by Florida's conservative Voice. For those of you with zero sense of humor, the whole point of this post is to expose hypocrisy. We don't actually care she's maskless. We care she fearmongers about Florida, but then has the audacity to vacation there. Brandon Leslie, the reporter who first tweeted the video, wrote. And then it goes on. New York Times opted not to cover the Ocasio-Cortez maskless trip to the bar, according to a search of the paper's archives. The Washington Post didn't cover it either, according to a search of the paper's website. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that these mainstream newspapers wouldn't cover this? It's on video. It's not like somebody's said, oh, I saw her, literally on video. CNN covered AOC on Monday morning, but not the whole maskless trip to a crowded bar. They didn't cover that part. Instead, the liberal network dedicated a segment to the squad leader's recent tweet accusing Republicans of being motivated by sexual frustrations when they criticize her. So as you probably heard, AOC was so angry that she was caught maskless and drinking and partying it up in Miami in the beautiful Miami sun. Something that she couldn't do, of course, in New York because she'd have to be wearing a mask and, it would just be not fun at all because that's the way they've made New York, the politicians there. Well, she's so angry at getting all of these different criticisms that she said, well, the reason why the Republicans are doing this and the reason why they're attacking me is because they really want to date me and they're just sexually frustrated. I'm sorry. How many of you out there want to really date AOC? I mean, can you imagine? Okay, so when they criticize her, analyst Mary Catherine Ham questioned if AOC's trip was dangerous to her health during the segment. But CNN failed to air the viral images of the maskless bar scene or even specifically mention she ditched her mask in the Sunshine State. And now keep in mind when she's in D.C., when AOC is in D.C., and they interview her, including when she's outside or inside, she always has a mask on. And that's what makes this so funny. The Canadians had to travel to Cancun in order for them to feel free because of these incredibly repressive COVID restrictions. And in New York City, you've got AOC who decides to go to Florida, the free state. It really is the free state, because she wants to not feel restricted and actually enjoy her life. Because naturally, rules don't apply to a United States Congresswoman who decides to make everybody else feel bad because they're not wearing a mask or they don't have a vax passport. CNN did not mention AOC since the viral photos emerged other than the New Day segment that ignored the mask hypocrisy, according to a search of transcripts via Arabian media. Over on MSNBC, AOC's name was not even uttered once. From the time the viral images of the maskless bar trip emerged through 9 a.m. Eastern Time Monday morning, according to Arabian media. The Miami trip came as AOC's home state of New York has seen a record surge in COVID-19 cases among the spread of the Omicron variant. While the mainstream news organizations have declined to cover AOC's maskless bar outing, others haven't gotten a pass for similar actions during the ongoing pandemic. The Washington Post and New York Times both managed to report that thousands of maskless Tampa Bay Buccaneer fans hit the streets in Florida to celebrate last season's Super Bowl victory. The Post even covered the adult son of Republican Arizona Governor Doug Ducey ditching his mask to attend a party last year, while the Times harped on then First Lady Melania Trump voting in 2020 without a mask. So the point here, okay, is not just that we have a media that is selectively reporting those people not wearing masks, namely Republicans, and namely people who are conservative or people who are critical thinkers or about freedom and are against mandates, right? They're not against masks, they're against the mandates. But then you have AOC, who's all about all of these mandates. I mean, she is a statist. She is a Stalinist. From words say go, she's a Stalinist. And then she goes to where? To party? Where does she go to feel free? Florida. Okay, folks, this is big news. Okay, this is big news because we're at this point in the pandemic where you have people from all over the world who are looking for places to go to be free again. And we need to continue to push back and just thank God for Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, for at least having one place that is warm to go to in the winter and free. Free as in, you feel like you're in a free society again. And in the Daily Wire, Ron, quote, will never recover from this. Latest leftist DeSantis scandal over family photos gets mercilessly mocked. And that's because Governor DeSantis sent out via social media a picture of his family for Christmas. And then the family was dressed the exact same way in their photo for New Year's. And the point is that the individuals criticizing the governor of Florida were criticizing him, saying, well, this was all like super ridiculous because how could they be in the exact same clothing on both days? Right? One day for Christmas where he posts, here we are, Christmas time, another day, New Year's Day or New Year's Eve. Here we are, and they're all wearing the same clothes. And the point is that Governor DeSantis fought back and said it's because his wife was going in for cancer treatment. And they took the photos at the same time. And this shows you how sick the left is because they're so intimidated by the one governor, And granted, there are other Republican governors who have done a good job. I understand that. But this is the governor that is the most prominent in the United States who has kept his state free. And they are terrified of this guy. And so the Babylon Bee decided to make fun of AOC. And this says, AOC lays wreath at her grave on January 6th. So this is funny because, as you recall, AOC said that she fled for her life. She feared for her life on January 6th of 2021. And so here we are, just a day past January 6th, 2022. And AOC, of course, and all the Democrats are out there talking about the insurrection on January 6th. So Babylon Bee says, AOC lays wreath at her grave on January 6th and has a picture of her with a wreath crying over her grave as she lays it on her grave. So Bronx, New York, United States Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez visited Woodlawn Cemetery this morning to grieve in quiet dignity at her grave on the one-year anniversary of her death on January 6th. She was seen openly weeping and tearing her clothes by the photo crew she brought with her. AOC, who was killed in the Capitol's House chamber by murderous Trump supporters, left a wreath where her body had been peacefully laid to rest. Though she made no official statements, eyewitness testimony claims she looked mournfully off into the distance as if contemplating the fleeting brevity of life. Quote, "She looked so brave and helpless," said Jim Acosta from the scene. "I could see that she was clearly hurting. I don't know how she gets up in the morning, especially since she's already dead. What a fighter." So way to go, Babylon Bee, for making fun of her. I can't wait to see what they come out with when it comes to her, AOC, going to Florida, and not to mention the Canadians Gone Wild scene as well. So Whoopi Goldberg talks about getting COVID. Now, this is relevant, podcast listeners, because of the fact that we keep having these diktats coming from NIH and the CDC and from mandates at various governments across the country saying you must be not once vaccinated, not twice vaccinated, you must be booster vaccinated in order to be vaccinated. And then and only then will you be safe from getting COVID. Well, apparently not so. Whoopi Goldberg said, quote, she had done everything I was supposed to do. She's the co-host of The View, and yet she got COVID even after being triple vaxxed. The View came back, and this is according to the Daily Wire. The View came back this week, but moderator Whoopi Goldberg was notably absent, and none of the co-hosts were meeting in person. This was due to a coronavirus outbreak that left Goldberg calling in sick for a few days to recover. On Tuesday, the famous comedian was back and expressed shock that she contracted the virus after doing everything she was supposed to do to stay safe. Goldberg joined her coworkers on a video call from home while wearing a shirt that said, "Over it." Quote, I left a couple of weeks ago just before the break because somebody I had been around tested positive for coronavirus, so I left, the 66-year-old Goldberg said. So I've been gone a long time, I feel. The Sister Act alum said she'd been extra careful, plus was vaccinated and boosted to increase her chances of not getting sick. Quote, I was all excited and, they have to test us. And so they sent people to test me and they tested me. And it was like, oh no, you're not coming back. We're not sending anybody to your house. You have corona. And it was like, wait, what? She continued. So why does this matter? It matters because every expert, this is not Mark Fisher, okay? These are all the experts in the medical field say the same thing. Everybody's going to get the coronavirus at some point. And obviously, as the variants come about, and this latest variant is easier to catch than the others, but it's not as serious, at least so we're told. Everybody's going to get it. But what we didn't think and what we didn't know, podcast listeners, is that the vaccinated would get it as well, because that was the whole purpose of that, uniquely English word vaccination. It has a meaning, not going to get because I got the vaccination. And it's not so. It's not so. And I'm sure, if you post anything like this on Facebook, of course, they're going to, well, for more information about how to get vaccinated, you need to click right here because that's the only way past this. It's complete and utter BS. So we have a clip in Whoopi Goldberg's own words, and she's not the only one that was vaxxed. It was also Geraldo Rivera who got COVID as well. We have that clip, and here it is.
There she is.
Meanwhile, Whoopi Goldberg is speaking out about catching COVID. She's taking a week off from The View to recover.
It was a shock because, I'm triple vaxxed. I haven't been anywhere. I haven't done anything. But that's the thing about the Omicron. You just don't know where it is.
Another TV stalwart, Fox News personality Geraldo Rivera, has also been hit.
I went to Key West, Florida with my family on vacation, and guess what? I came back with a scratchy throat.
Yeah, so they're all so surprised. I was double vaxxed and triple vaxxed and I still got COVID. Imagine that. I mean, I did everything I was told to do without trying to think about what I was supposed to do or could have done. And then, of course, you got Geraldo Rivera saying, I went to Key West and I came back, with COVID. It's like, yeah, well, Geraldo, you probably came back with an STD too, because you went to Key West after all. But that's beside the point. And then there's this great meme that we're going to put up right now. And if you can't see it, we will describe it if you're only listening to the podcast. But if you're watching it, you can see it. And it's this great meme that says, fashion trends for 2022, the Vax flap. So it's a picture of this guy wearing a shirt. And then there's this flap that's right on his arm below his shoulder, immediately beneath his shoulder. And it just clips open, the flap does, so that way you can just easily get your next booster shot. It's called the Vax flap. It's the Fauci Vax flat shirt, or whatever you want to call it. I think it's funny. I think it's really funny. And it kind of makes fun of, in my opinion, all these folks who have told us for nearly 2 years that the only way we get past this is for you to get vaxxed, when in fact, that is not indeed the case, right? The vaccine is good for some. I do believe that. But not good for all. And we were never told that. And we were also never told that you were going to get this virus no matter what. And had we been told that, and had we been told the truth, which I still believe is not really forthcoming by the U.S. authorities, you're going to continue to have resistance, in my opinion, rightfully so, by the citizenry as to what they should or shouldn't do with respect to this virus. Not to mention, there's no early treatment that we're being told that should take place, which is a whole nother story. So next up, podcast listeners, the U.S. economy falters. This should not come as a surprise. The U.S. economy adds only 199,000 jobs in December, way below expectations. And this is in the Daily Caller. The U.S. economy recorded an increase of only 199,000 jobs in December, and the unemployment rate dipped to 3.9%, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics announced Friday. Total non-farm payroll employment increased by 199,000 in December, according to BLS, and the number of unemployed Americans dipped to 6.3 million, by the way, which you should not believe. Here's why. In December, of course, you usually have a lot more people working because of the holidays, right? You have more people shopping, more people buying, more need to deliver the stuff. So you need a lot of seasonal employees. And yet the expectation is we would be in the many hundreds of thousands, like maybe 400,000 or 500,000 new employees put on payrolls. But instead, it was under 200,000. The part you shouldn't believe here is when the government says only 6.3 million Americans are unemployed. That's not true. My opinion is it's probably 20 or 30 million people that aren't employed. And that's because the government doesn't consider you to be unemployed if you stop looking for work. Imagine that. If you are someone who's sitting home and you're receiving a check for not working, for whatever the reason, and you stop looking for work, the government stops counting you as being unemployed. As far as the government is concerned, you don't exist. And so this idea that there are only 6.3 million Americans that don't have jobs, but really want jobs, I just don't believe it. I think that there are, 20 or 30 million Americans who are unemployed. Now, whether they do or don't want to work is a different story. The question is they should be working, because there are literally millions of jobs that aren't filled. But when you pay people not to show up, people are rational. Don't pay them to show up, and guess what happens? They don't show up. So the Wall Street Journal projected the economy to add 422,000 jobs, even though 199,000 were added. And that's really bad, because with the federal government wanting to increase interest rates to try to slow down the economy, not put a stop to the economy, but slow it down, mainly because they want to slow down inflation. We already have an economy that is slowing naturally. And since the economy is slowing naturally, yet we still have really high inflation, the fear, of course, is that when interest rates start to ratchet up this year in 2022, you're going to have potentially a recession. And I think that this is probably going to happen. So, quote, the economy right now is in a good spot and resilient enough to withstand the COVID surge, said Julia Pollack, an economist at jobs website ZipRecruiter. The WSJ reported, we just expect this year to bring a more moderate, sustainable pace of recovery and growth. I'm not buying that. Payroll firm ADP reported Wednesday that the U.S. economy added 807,000 private sector jobs in December, more than doubling expectations as cases of the Omicron coronavirus variant surged. So we may have added 800,000 plus jobs in December, but they're not filled. And that's really the issue, right? So you have to ask yourself the question, well, what if those jobs were indeed filled by people? Wouldn't that fuel inflation more? And you see the problem that our economy has right now. The economy has this problem where you have millions of jobs unfilled. People are being paid to not work. And then if we stop paying them to not work and they go back to work and they, let's say, earn a little bit more money, it's going to fuel inflation even more, which is going to ratchet up interest rates even more. So I don't see how we're going to get away from having a recession in 2022. I'm sure there are plenty of people that would disagree with me, but it's probably going to happen sooner rather than later. And good old Joe Biden, I mean, it's pretty clear that he doesn't have a clue as to how to manage from a macro perspective this economy. I mean, he's just kind of on the sidelines, and I think he's just letting his people do whatever they want to do. And Congress is running amok. Whatever they want to do, they can do. And meanwhile, his numbers are tanking. Biden's numbers are tanking. So the Let's Go Brandon chain of stores, yes, podcast listeners, there's a chain of stores called Let's Go Brandon, has expanded now to 10 as Biden's numbers continue to tank further. In another sign of the public's disenchantment with the Biden presidency, as his poll numbers plummet, the owner of the Let's Go Brandon store chain that spans New England is expanding the number of stores from 8 to 10. And these are in New England. Owner Keith Lambert told Fox News the new stores will be located in Salisbury and Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Lambert said, quote, a customer came into one of our locations and bought a Let's Go Brandon sticker and went out to his car and stuck it over his Biden sticker. And that was it. It was just like, I'm done with this guy. People have buyer's remorse. Business is very, very good right now. The initial name for Lambert's stores was New England for Trump, but he rebranded his Hanson, Massachusetts outlet and then repeated the action with his store in North Attleboro and changed the names of his other stores, also in Massachusetts, and rebranded the rest of his stores in Bellingham, East Bridgewater, Easton, Somerset, and Warwick, Rhode Island. Lambert told Fox News he received a death threat through the mail. He added, "For the most part, it hasn't been bad. I don't take them seriously." Lambert said of Biden, his decision making is not good. I don't think he's doing the job that he should be doing, and I'm not happy with it, just like a lot of other people are not happy with it. The ubiquitous "Let's Go Brandon" meme was triggered in early October when an NBC sports reporter when an NBC sports reporter interviewing NASCAR driver Brandon Brown at Talladega Superspeedway in Alabama, after Brown scored his first career NASCAR Xfinity Series win, stated in the video that the crowd was chanting "Let's Go Brandon," when in reality the crowd was actually chanting "F Joe Biden." And then beneath this, by the way, in the article, it has a tweet from Donald Trump Jr. He tweeted out, "I'm pretty sure they're not chanting 'Let's Go Brandon' as the NBC reporter is telling us. What do you hear?" I always thought that was such a great tweet. It's just so funny. So this tells you, when was the last time, podcast listeners, in American history or in your lifetime, that you remember there being a chain of stores, let's say 5 to 10 stores, this guy has 10, that are branded specifically for the purpose of making fun of the sitting president? Stores. And the stores are making money. They're actually doing well. And this is in New England, okay? New England, notorious for being liberal and voting for Democrats. More specifically, in Rhode Island, in Massachusetts, okay, and I think in New Hampshire. I think those are the 3 states, maybe more. These are liberal areas. And so things are not going well for the Biden administration, and the economy is faltering. And by the way, when I say that, I don't say it because I'm happy. I'm saying it because I'm genuinely worried, because I don't think the government has any tools that are left to help make our economy more stable, other than increasing interest rates, which will cause a recession, because I think they're going to have to really ratchet them up, despite what they're telling you. "Oh, we're only going to do it gradually, like 3 times, like just 1/8 of a point or 1/4 of a point." Don't believe it. Don't believe it. If inflation continues, which it's very likely to do, they're going to have to ratchet up interest rates by three full points and maybe even more. So Eric Adams, the new mayor of New York City, has insulted low-skilled workers. By the way, if you were a Republican and you insulted low-skilled workers the way the new mayor, Eric Adams of New York City, just did, you would probably be impeached. You would be removed from office. You would be considered to be an elitist. But the new elitists in America really are the Democrats, because they really don't see working people as being useful. They don't really see them as people. They don't really see them as people that can be upwardly mobile, or should be. And Eric Adams literally just said it. So in the Gateway Pundit, get this, newly sworn in New York City Mayor Eric Adams on Tuesday said low-skill workers like dishwashers don't have the skills to work in an office. Adams made the remarks after he signed an executive order to assist in New York City's COVID recovery efforts. Quote, "My low-skilled workers, my cooks, my dishwashers, my messengers, my shoe shine people, and those who work at Dunkin' Donuts, they don't have the academic skills to sit in a corner office," Adams said. And so in the Post-Millennial, they tweeted out, New York City Mayor Eric Adams says that low-skilled workers like cooks, dishwashers, and shoe shiners, and those who work at the Dunkin' Donuts don't have the academic skills to sit in a corner office. And then tweeted this out because it's just so outrageous that any politician would say this. We're going to talk about this briefly. But first, listen to Eric Adams, the brand new mayor of New York City, in his own words. We have that clip, and here it is.
If my businesses are sharing with their employees, you are part of the ecosystem of this city. My low-skilled workers, my cooks, my dishwashers, my messengers, my shoe shine people, those who work in Dunkin' Donuts, They don't have the academic skills to sit in a corner office. They need this. We are in this together.
Yeah. So, first of all, Mayor Eric Adams, you say my dishwashers. They're not your dishwashers. You say my cooks, my shoe shiners. These people aren't yours. They don't belong to you. They don't belong to you. I mean, this is part of what is in the psyche of Democrat politicians nationwide, that these people are theirs, that they belong to them. They belong, they're property. They're not. And these are also individuals that are upwardly mobile. Podcast listeners, he said, my dishwashers, they can't work in an office because, they don't have the academic capability of ever getting there. They just don't have it. Well, you know what? I started out as a newspaper delivery boy. Then I was a dishwasher. Then I was a busboy. Then I was a waiter. And then I was a bartender. And then I went to college and bartended through college. And then I got a job. And this is the problem with the Democrat Party, is they don't believe in America. They don't believe in the upward mobility of America. They don't believe that that's possible. And I sometimes think that they don't want it to be possible. And if a politician ever said to me, while I was washing dishes, you're my dishwasher, I'd be like, no, I'm not. This job is a means to an end. It is not the end. It is not the job. It is a job. And I'm doing this job. And by the way, you do learn skills because you learn how to work with other people and you learn how to wash dishes. And there is something to that. And hopefully you get to the next job. But for some reason in this country, Democrats really don't believe that America is a place that you can move upwardly. And you know what? You see all these people coming into this country. I'm talking about the legal people coming into this country legally. And just using the folks, just identifying folks who are coming here from India as an example. All right. I know many of these individuals who have come to the United States from India legally, and it is extraordinary to me how upwardly mobile they are when they start with literally nothing. And so not only is it possible, but it's also part of your own culture as to whether you really think that you can't move upward. If you really don't think that, you probably aren't going to. Or if you aren't interested in doing it, then you're probably not going to. But I think it's pretty safe to say that America is still a place that you can make it. But if you're in New York City, maybe there isn't a lot of opportunity there. Maybe because the elites have convinced you that the reason you are a dishwasher is because that's all you will ever be. I mean, who do they think they are? So next up, podcast listeners, I have an interesting segment here, and it's in the Wall Street Journal. It's called Yellowstone is a Huge Hit That Started with Small Town Fans. So I'm not sure if any of you out there in podcast land has watched Yellowstone. It is a series that has been produced by Paramount's network, and you can find it on Amazon. I think it was on Peacock too, but I'm not certain. But it's certainly on Amazon, and I've watched quite a bit of this series. And you would think that a series about a ranch in Montana with cowboys and cowgirls would be like pretty old school and not very fun and kind of boring. I mean, you would really kind of think that. But the fact of the matter is, it's a pretty extraordinary series. It's an extraordinary series because it deals very briefly with a family that wants to save their ranch from development, from basically people who want to poach their land, if not just outright steal it so that they can develop the land. It's an extraordinary series. And the thing is, for people who are out there in podcast land who value space, who value moving to the countryside or living in the countryside, I think every single American loves the fact that there are huge open spaces in our country. And there are places you can go to that feel wild and open and free. And you would love to have a piece of that. And in my own personal life, I feel like I do have a piece of that. And I think every American would like that. what's interesting about Yellowstone is you would think such a show would appeal only to, let's say, red state types, correct? That's what you would think. And that's how Yellowstone developed its fan base. It was with small towns and small markets, smaller cities, and people who lived in small towns and countrysides. Those were the people who were watching Yellowstone on Amazon, and they became fans. And now what's happened is Yellowstone has become this huge hit because people in major cities are watching it too. And why is that? I am convinced, podcast listeners, I think it's pretty clear that during this era of COVID lockdowns and COVID restrictions and lack of freedoms, people in cities yearn to be free in the countryside and on ranches and great open spaces where they don't have people telling them what to do. And literally, that is the theme of Yellowstone. A family that says the rules are our rules because it's our ranch and you're not going to take away our property. The government's not going to take away our property. Land poachers and developers aren't going to take away our property. We are the preservationists. And in Yellowstone, the preservationists are the conservatives. And that actually is quite consistent with the openness of America, right? You always hear the Democrats talk about flyover country. Well, guess what? Flyover country is where all the open spaces are. And those are Republicans. And those are also happen to be the people that are the land preservationists. The Democrats are the ones in the cities who are trying to tell you what you can do and can't do with your land. So it's really kind of fascinating. This whole series, this Wall Street Journal article titled Yellowstone is a huge hit that started with small town fans is worth reading. But more importantly than that is if you don't want to read it, then I highly recommend that you watch this series. You will become a fan right away because it is very similar to The Godfather, but for cowboys. I kid you not. It's very cool. So next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is. And it's the dumbest bill in America. And it is banning plastic forks. Yes, you heard that correctly, podcast listeners. Banning plastic forks in Washington, D.C. Yes. So the Washington, D.C. government, not the federal government, but the local government in Washington, D.C. that governs the city of Washington, has a mayor and a city council, and they passed the Zero Waste Omnibus Amendment Act. And they passed that in December of 2020, but the bill goes into effect in 2022. In other words, January 1st of 2022. So the bill's now been in effect for about, not quite a week, about a week or so. And it's called the Zero Waste Omnibus Amendment Act. And the District of Columbia's goal of 80% waste, by the way, I'm reading from the DC's website. This is in their own words. The District of Columbia's goal of 80% waste diversion from landfills and incinerators by 2032. The act prohibits food service entities, meaning restaurants and carry-out places, from providing accessory disposable food service ware items unless first requested by the customer. The new requirements will save businesses time and money, according to DC. Yeah, sure. While also cutting down on unnecessary waste that ends up in landfills or incinerated or as pollution in the local rivers. So this bill was pushed by Trash Free DC and ZeroWasteDC.gov. And the bill basically says that the items regulated, which means banned, are utensils, including chopsticks, napkins, condiment packets, straws, and stirrers. And the law applies to the following establishments: restaurants, bars, cafeterias, carry-out, schools, religious institutions providing free coffee or food to parishioners at a service, hospitals, nonprofits that serve food, unsure where your organization, institution, or government or group is regulated, or you need assistance, you can call DC, of course, but those are the basic ones that are going to be affected by this. And here is the law. The law says that when someone orders food from your establishment, and let's say it's a carryout order, and the individual comes to pick up their food, that you cannot provide forks or utensils or napkins or condiments or straws or chopsticks unless the person actually requests them affirmatively. So I presume in DC, you're going to have the utensil police, and they're going to make random calls to restaurants and churches and hospitals and cafeterias and carryouts and bars. And they're going to order food, and they're going to say, oh, wait a minute. I just ordered that food, and I'm with the DC utensil police. And you did not ask me, Mr. Restaurant, whether or not I wanted utensils. Since you did not ask me, then I'm going to fine you. And guess what the fine is, podcast listeners? It's $500. It's a $500 fine to the bar, to the restaurant, to the cafeteria, to the religious institution, to the hospital. And here is why this is so stupid. This is so stupid because I'm like you. I'm sure I would never remember to ask for, plastic utensils when I'm at work and I decide to DoorDash something or decide to carry something out myself. And don't you think that there's already an incentive in place for the restaurants to provide less stuff because it would save them money automatically? I think they kind of already do that. But there's even more to this story. So yesterday, as recently as yesterday, I drove from Maryland to Washington, D.C. via the Parkway. Okay? So I got onto the Parkway, and there's this Parkway that takes you past Andrews Air Force Base. And then eventually this Suitland Parkway is what it's called, takes you to Washington, D.C. So again, the Parkway starts right around Andrews Air Force Base, and then it ends up dead-ending into Washington, D.C. You enter Washington, D.C. like only a couple miles into the Parkway, just to let you know. Why does this matter? It matters because as I was driving down this Parkway in Washington, D.C., there was trash along this Parkway that you just couldn't believe. Everything and anything under the sun. Clearly, the people who are walking along the Parkway, clearly the people that are driving cars and that live in these areas of this Parkway in Washington, D.C., just throw trash on the ground all the time. And it has accumulated to the point that you can't possibly imagine. And I know what you're going to think, podcast listeners. Well, then that's why we need to ban plastic forks and plastic utensils. No. We need to fine people instead for throwing trash on the ground. And we need to educate them about why that doesn't make sense, because the issue is properly disposing of trash and finding ways to recycle it, not to ban these things. Okay? Innovation solves the problem, as we've talked about many times in Mark and the Millennials. But in addition to that, if you see a lot of trash on the side of your streets, what is the first thing you think? Oh, I need to ban that. No. What you want to do is figure out a way of getting these individuals from stop polluting, from stop throwing things out their window, walking along the street. I mean, how many times have you seen someone who go to a fast food place and they're walking along the street and they're eating the French fries because they live nearby, and they're walking home and they just throw the French fry box out just right on the ground. And you say to yourself, who would do that? Well, see, on the left, what they think is we need to ban the box that holds the French fries. That's what we need to do. And on the right, we say, no, we need to hold that individual accountable for polluting and fine them. And in addition to that, if you want to create incentives for recycling, that's great. But if you want to create incentives for recycling, you still need people to put the trash items in the bin and not on the ground. And that really is the issue. But in DC, of course, they've got the plastic fork police that are going to call you and say, oh my God, you own that carryout and you provided me a plastic fork even though I did not ask for it. And therefore, here's a $500 fine. This shows you how messed up the left is. They're completely blind, and so are these zero-waste D.C. people who, if they just drove along Suitland Parkway in Washington, D.C. and saw the vast amount of trash on the side of the road, a parkway, right? Parkways were supposed to be beautiful. That's why they're established in the United States. They're supposed to be parkways like a park, thus the name Parkway. Clean, beautiful, pristine, tree-lined. Well, this parkway is tree-lined, and it used to be pristine and beautiful, but the current mayor of Washington, D.C., and the idiots that run that city have run it into the ground, which is why more people as a percentage have moved out of Washington, D.C. since the pandemic than any other city in America. It has the largest decrease in population of any city in America by a percentage. And yet they don't see, with all this trash on the side of the road, that passing this stupid bill isn't going to fix the trash that people are dropping on the side of the road. Because that is a cultural problem. And to make sure I don't get myself in trouble, I'm not saying it is a white problem or a black problem. It is a cultural problem. It's a problem of culture. I see people do this all the time, no matter their color, and they throw trash on the side of the road, and it just needs to be enforced, and we need to provide an education, and we need to provide an incentive to recycle these things. And that's the dumbest bill in America, banning plastic forks. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.